Big thanks to Kamado Joe for sponsoring this episode.
Cooking briskets is an art and every expert has its own method. One of the things that stand out is that some experts inject their briskets and some don't. What is the difference? Is it going to make your brisket better? I have two identical briskets, both from the same breed of cow, both raised in the same way, both butchered in the same way. And I'm going to treat them exactly the same, except for the difference that one is going to be injected and the other one isn't. So you and me can find out what the difference is between injecting and not injecting. A brisket comes from the cow and is part of the breastplate. It's known as a tough cut of beef with a lot of intramuscular fat. And if cooked the right way for a long time, it turns out tender and juicy. I'm gonna season both briskets with salt and pepper. I'm just gonna apply a little layer of salt. You don't have to worry about over salting your brisket on the outside because the brisket in itself is a big piece of meat and it can handle a lot of salt. Next up, I'm gonna put on some black pepper, and you can put on as much as you like. And I love black pepper on my brisket, so I'm gonna add a lot. During the cook, the intensity of the pepper is gonna mellow down. In the end, it won't be as intensive, but if you don't like pepper that much, just add a little less. For the injection, I'm going to use 2 cubes of dried beef broth, a liter of warm water, and then just dissolve it. The goal of the injection is to add as much flavor as you can to the brisket to make it juicier, taste better, get more intense flavor. And that's why I chose to make beef broth injection. And one of the main ingredients that causes that is MSG. It will make the flavors of any dish that you put it in pop, and it will do the same for the brisket. Therefore, I chose this basic version of an injection fluid. And I'm going to take one of my briskets and inject as much of it as I can into that brisket. I'm going to spread out my injection. You got to be careful where you hit it. You want to go inside that muscle so it doesn't pop out again. Of course, you don't have to inject the fat, so stay away from it. Otherwise, it's just going to run out again. Don't worry too much about the spread of the injection. Just make sure you hit it everywhere. Then during the cook, the fluids will spread out, will get into every little bit of muscle that this brisket has. How do you know your brisket's fully loaded up? Everywhere you put injection in, it starts squirting out again. Both briskets are now ready to go. I'm gonna be cooking my briskets on the Kamado Joe Big Joe. This thing has enough room for 2 briskets, and I'm gonna use the great extension that's gonna give me that extra level to get 2 of those briskets on and cook them absolutely perfect. Let's fire this thing up. I'm gonna start by taking out the grill grates and the heat deflectors. Then I'm going to load it up halfway with Kamado Joe Big Block charcoal, put in 2 fire starters, light them up, and then I like to put a little bit of charcoal on the side of these fire starters to speed up the process. And once the fire starter's burned out and the charcoal's lit up, I'm going to add a chunk of smoke wood. Now you can choose anything that you like, but I suggest you use something like beech, oak, hickory. It's gonna work best for your brisket. I'm gonna put the heat deflectors in, put a drip tray in, put the grill grates in, and now it's time to put the injected brisket on the grill grates. I'm putting this at the bottom position because it holds so much juice. And most of that juice is gonna drip back out again. It's gonna fall down into my dripping pan and not in my heat deflectors. And now I can place the other brisket on top. And that's why this grill grate extender is such a handy feature. Each of them get their own core thermometer. Now it's time to close the lid and let these briskets smoke. Of course, I need to get that barbecue up to temperature. It's currently running at 0 degrees Celsius. Yes, it's that cold out. And first thing I'm gonna do is open the top vent. Set it to 2 stripes open, and then the bottom vent is gonna go all the way close to 2 fingers. This way I still have enough air draft to heat up the barbecue, heat up the brisket, and all the heat deflectors. That's gonna take a lot of energy, so that's gonna be my first half hour or so. Let it come up, stay close to the barbecue, keep your eye on that thermometer, and once it hits 120 degrees Celsius, you need to stable it out, and you're going to do that by closing the bottom vent until 1 finger open. And if that's not enough, you're going to close it a little more until you're almost all the way closed. And you can go as far as this. If that doesn't work, then you're gonna start tuning the top vent to make sure you get it to the right position. 120 degrees Celsius, running stable, that's what you're aiming for the first part. The briskets have been in for 4 hours and they're both running at a temperature of 72 degrees Celsius core temperature. Now, the funny thing is that when we injected the brisket with the hot fluid, that one got up to temperature real quick. But as time went by, they mellowed out and came at the same temperature. Let's take a closer look at them, see how they're doing. We got a beautiful mahogany red color on the outside of the brisket. That is the sign that we're going to have a smoke ring and beautiful color. We got that nice bark with a peppery rub. But we also have some puddling, some wet spots on top of our brisket. Now that's something that we want to solve. We're going to raise the temperature up to 140 degrees Celsius in the barbecue. But before we do, I want to show you the difference between the ones sitting on the top and the ones that we injected. We can see that the top brisket has been dripping down at the bottom brisket and it's going to make for a better bark. So let's get to it. Open up the top vent a little bit to 2 stripes open. And then the bottom vent is going to a finger thick open. That's going to raise up the temperature to 140 degrees Celsius. I'm going to let it run for another 2 hours and then we'll see. Yeah. Wow. This is the brisket that hasn't been injected and it looks absolutely fantastic. Build up a beautiful crust. We lost most of the moisture and this thing looks absolutely freaking delicious. Now the temperature of this thing is around 88 degrees Celsius. Normally I would cook my brisket up to 92 to 94 degrees Celsius. However, we're going to wrap it and then we're going to let it rest. So that temperature is going to still go up. And I don't want it to go up to 96 and 98 where it's going to be fall apart tender because we got a long rest ahead of us. I'm going to wrap this up in butcher's paper. You can wrap it up any way you like. Just make sure it's well packed, which means the meat is fully wrapped, completely covered, and it looks like that. Then into a tray, covered and sealed with aluminum foil. Now here we have the injected brisket. Again, a beautiful brisket. Nice bark, really good looking. Cooked to the same temperature, cooked to the same specifications. I do see a little less mahogany red color on this brisket. Even though we got that nice bark and it looks fantastic, there's this little hint of mahogany missing. I don't know if that matters. We're gonna find out later on after the resting period when we start slicing into it. For now, we're gonna wrap this up the same way we did with the brisket that wasn't injected. And the resting period is done in my oven. Both briskets are going in at a temperature of 65 degrees Celsius and I'm gonna let them sit there for at least 10 hours. And there they are, sitting side by side, the brisket that we didn't inject and the brisket that we did inject. I'm gonna take these out and we're gonna take another look at them. The best way to do that is to cut into it and take a look inside. Ooh, look at that beautiful smoke ring. That's almost a centimeter thick smoke ring. Fat rendered down perfectly. You see it from the holes that consisted there. Let's get a slice out of this. Almost no pull. Good looking brisket. And the other one looks like this. Beautiful brisket. Absolutely gorgeous. And again, a nice smoke ring. Juicy brisket. And how does that compare? Which one do you think looks best? I think the non-injected brisket looks the best. It's got a beautiful bark all around that brisket. If you look at the injected one, it has great bark, but it has spots where the bark is great and spots where the bark is not that great. Now smoke ring wise, we got an overall great smoke ring on both briskets. The fat rendered down a little more on the injected brisket, and that might have something to do with injecting it with a hot fluid. Take a look at the slices and tenderness. They're both equally tender and look almost identical. So there is now only one thing left to do, the taste test. Let's start with the injected brisket. It tastes freaking amazing. I have a good smoke profile. I have a good amount of bark flavor. I got that peppery crunch. It is a really nice brisket. Now let's compare that to the brisket that I didn't inject. It's really, really close. I think we need a second opinion. Choose one.
Choose?
Yeah.
You didn't choose.
Yeah, but this is my problem. I need help.
Tough one, actually. I don't know.
If you can have only one for the rest of your life.
I'll take both of them.
Which
Bark
one?
Bark.
Yeah? Non-injected brisket for the rest of your life?
And that's why I called it the bark one. This is for me the essential of barbecue. Bark, barbecue flavor.
I'm gonna contradict myself. The brisket that has been injected has more beef flavor. So if you have one bite out of it, it pops more. It's more like a, wow, that's a great brisket. However, the non-injected brisket has a more honest flavor. Honestly, I can't make up my mind. I'm gonna leave it up to you. You tell me, which one of these is best? How do you like your brisket? Injected with beef broth or au naturel?